click record and just welcome people onto the session. We've got Shelley is going to chair today, and we just hope people benefit from some of the great sort of experience and knowledge and signposting that some of our panel might be able to do to build on what we've been learning around strengthening bids, looking at social value measurement, and approaching things in the right way when it comes to looking at funding and investment. So over to you, Shelley.
Thanks, Nicola. Give you a chance to catch your breath now.
I know.
So yeah, welcome to our Funding Insight panel. We have Kat, Jess and Charlotte with us this afternoon. We've got about 45 minutes and we'll be getting as much insight and expert tips from an organisational perspective in terms of securing those funding bids. So I think you're probably the best people to introduce yourselves. So if I could just one by one ask you to introduce yourself, tell us about your role at your organisation, and maybe if you've ever previously worked with other funding bodies in the past, if you could touch on that too. So can I come to Kat? Can I come to you first, please?
Yeah, sure, thank you. Thanks for having me along today as well, everyone. It's lovely to meet you all. So I'm Kat. I'm recently joined as the investment manager at GMCVO. I'm sure you've all heard of GMCVO across Greater Manchester. So I've been in post for 5-6 weeks now. I think this is week 6. I lead the investment team at GMCVO and all of our investment funds. Before that, I was at Unlimited, the Foundation for Social Entrepreneurs. I was there for about 5 years. I worked on our accelerator program. So a lot of our accelerator programs were people who were going through a fast growth stage. So usually trading 2+ years, ready to jump into the next stage of fast growth. But then in the last year, I've been working on our early stage funds. And then before that, as I've worked in the sector for years, I've been an investment manager at Key Fund. I've ran social enterprises. I've been the senior manager of a charity. I was around in the sector. I don't know how long. You need to stop me from waffling because I talk a lot as well.
Oh, I mean,
it's good to know all this intel.
Yeah, it's great to have this expertise.
I was in the sector when social impact came into the sector, when the lottery started talking about outcomes, outputs, milestones, and suddenly you had to start writing funding bids with loads of language in it that you'd never even heard of before. And when I was at Unlimited, I was responsible for creating the social impact strategy for our social entrepreneurs. So how do we help people measure social impact, social value? What tools and resources do we provide? So I was dead excited that you're doing this session today. And as much as I can input into it, please let me do so.
Oh, fantastic. Thanks, Kat. That's brilliant. Jess, can I come to you next?
Yeah, thank you, Shelley, and hello everyone. Thanks for having me here today. And yeah, it's fantastic that you've got this session running. I think one of the hardest things to find out are these great opportunities, where do you start? So I'm Jess and I run the accelerator, the NatWest Accelerator in Manchester. So we work with businesses from all different shapes and sizes, all different industries and backgrounds. And we have got a particular strand on the accelerator that is for purpose-led businesses. Which is fantastic. We've got a load of different organisations on there. Before joining NatWest, I've been in the world of enterprise now for around 8 years. Before joining NatWest, I worked with the University of Manchester, so working on early stage ideas, how do we actually make them into something worthwhile? And before that, I was introduced to the world of enterprise through working on an ERDF project, so European Regional Development Fund, and it was my job to actually allocate the grants. So I've got a bit of experience in what they look for from that side of things once the funding's already been in place. So yeah, that's a bit about me.
Oh, thank you, Jess. That's great. And Charlotte.
Hi, and hi everyone. Thanks for having me. Lovely to meet you all. So I work at MAC, Manchester Community Central, on the capacity building team, working with local VCSE groups across Manchester. With sustainability, with governance, with policy writing, and also a big part of that is looking at funding. So, for example, things like acting as a critical friend, reviewing applications and supporting groups to strengthen those applications. We also have a funding portal. So for members, we have a free membership, and members can access a funding portal which alerts you to new and upcoming funds that are relevant to your organisation. And we also run lots of training events, so things like bid writing, digital fundraising, as just a tool for groups to learn more on funding. And besides the MAC job, I run the Manchester Hygiene Bank. So that's a bit more on the ground of working with groups across Manchester, just kind of more of a distribution project of getting donations to various groups that are, you know, unable or can't afford hygiene products. So we partner with the Pankhurst Trust, MASH, Manchester Refugee Support Network. So a bit of variety, but I've only been doing this for a year and a half now, so still fairly new to the sector. But yeah, thank you for having me.
Oh, well, thank you all for being here, and what an enormous amount of experience we have in the room at the moment. I think we could probably do it about 2 days with you lot. It'd be fantastic. So as you just touched upon, Jessica, it's really difficult to know where to start when looking for stuff. So, you know, how would you recommend people go about searching for what support and funds are out there?
Is that in relation to funding, Shelley?
Yeah, in relation to funding. Where should people start if they don't know where to look?
Now, there's a great tool which I recommend to all our, I suppose all our businesses, but especially those that are looking for grants in particular. Now, there's a grant finder called Swoop. Nicola, I think, might have come across it if I've mentioned it in the past. But yeah, Swoop, it's called, and it's ultimately a filter. So you can go down and put, you know, all the requirements that you've got, what the funding might be for, your location. Obviously, a lot of funding pots are geographical. But it's an amazing online, really quick, really simple, and it just does a search, a national search over all the pots that could potentially be available. Now, it's not to say all of them are relevant, but yeah, it's free of charge.
Right.
It's just a filter, really. So it does the scanning for you, and then you can, you know, be put to the right website, the right provider.
And is that aimed more at private businesses? Do you know? I mean, because there's some that are aimed at, you know, broadly, a broad brush. I'm just curious.
It's all grants and funding. So Swoop ultimately is a funding. It's a funding finder, but then there's a particular grant finder as well.
Oh,
so it asks for filters down your business. You know, the size of your business, the need of your business, what you want it for. You know, if is it tech development, is it staff development, all sorts of things. It asks you, and it filters across.
And it's probably a good one for the voluntary and community sector to know about. It's probably one that they aren't using, even if they are accessing. Charlotte might talk more about some of the grant access stuff they've got. So thank you. No, really good to hear about that one.
Fantastic. And Kat, what would you say is the best way to start searching for funding?
Well, from an investment point of view, obviously social investment, just point out that social investment is always a loan, and loans aren't for everybody. And from my experience, a lot of people approach social investors not understanding that it's a loan and you've got to pay them back. So having a really good idea of the funding that you're looking for in the first place, whether or not it's grant funding, loan finance, will definitely help you go in the right direction. Before you start to look at social investment, it's really good to have a really good understanding of your legal structure, because different legal structures allow you to apply for different types of investment. When you start to search for what you're looking for, having that knowledge about whether you can only apply for a repayable loan, or whether you're a share model and you can apply for equity, or whether you're generating enough profits to have a look at a profit share model, means that you're kind of filtering out different options within the search function anyway. You also need to know what you want to spend the money on. It's a bit like when you approach grant funders, you wouldn't just approach like every grant funder in the entire country. You've got to have a really clear picture about like, what is it? What do you want to do with the money? Where do you want to go with it? What's the impact that you're creating as a result of it? And then that will allow you to kind of really narrow down your search. From a search perspective, there's a website called the Good Finance website, and all the social investors across the whole of the country are on there, and whether that's like every single different kind of social investment that you can raise is on there. Everyone's got very different requirements. They've got different interest rates. They've got, from a social impact perspective, some people like GMCVO are very light touch with the impact data that we ask for and the kind of metrics we use, versus Key Fund, who I worked for 6 years ago, who will say, we want a theory of change from you, and we want to understand how you measure impact. So the best thing for you to do is, once you've found that organisation where you actually think they match you, is to give them a call, and just to make sure that then they will still fund you. Don't just go ahead and apply straight away, ring them up. But
this might be a tough question to answer, but in a nutshell, how would you explain whether somebody should be going for social investment?
Well, you just need to think of it. I mean, think of it as, would you go to the bank and get a loan if you couldn't afford to repay a loan? And if your business isn't either generating enough income every month that you've got a surplus that could then repay loans, or whether or not you've got a really good idea for growth. So you think, well, actually, we haven't got the money in the business now, but if we purchased a piece of equipment which allowed us to increase our productivity, or we bought in more staff, or we got a new premises, that would then allow us to increase our income to then repay a loan. Like, you wouldn't buy a house if you couldn't afford a mortgage. So you just need to think about it as you would do a normal loan. And as a social investor, they will never give you the money if you can't afford. Like, I would never give a loan to anyone that couldn't afford to repay it. So you have to have, like, especially if you're looking for growth finance where you haven't got enough money, you know, we're looking at a cash flow forecast and trusting the figures that you put on a cash flow forecast, having that, the background knowledge behind it, and having that kind of common sense, like, this is what we need to do to get to the next level. Can you give us the money, please? Is all we'll need, really. We're very trusting as well as social investors. We love people, and so we'll trust you whatever you tell us usually.
That's brilliant. Thanks, Kat. And Charlotte, same question to you. What would be your advice for somebody who's searching for funding? Where should they start?
Well, for us, I think one of the first main things that we kind of highlight is having a variety of sources of income generation. So, you know, not having all your eggs in one basket. So if you are, for example, looking at funding, look at other ways around it as well. Look at crowdfunding, use social media events, online events, other events. Also, utilize your skills and connections that you already have. So, for example, if you are good with social media, act on that. And it's free as well. So it's one of the quickest and cheapest options to get started with fundraising. Look at who your networks are and connections. For example, speak to your service users and previous supporters to get their opinions and feedback on, you know, who you could connect with and where you can start with. Look at, for example, organizations like MAC, just to plug our own organization, but for example, we've got the funding portal, which is similar to Jess's, I think it was a Swoop, similar to Swoop. So, you know, it's like a database of different funds. You get alerts of what's coming up. You can pick what kind of pot you're looking for. So if it's for a specific project, if it's for equipment or room hire, and going from there, and being creative as well. You know, if one way isn't successful, don't think of it as a failure, just look for others. I think, as Kat said as well, picking up the phone to different people and making those connections as well. So for example, I know the National Lottery funds, they're really keen to chat to groups before and during the application process, and whether the fund isn't suitable for them, you know, they're great at directing you and signposting you to relevant funds and just kind of helping you strengthen any applications that you've got.
That's really useful. Yeah, knowing that you can actually talk to some potential funders is really helpful. They're a font of knowledge, aren't they? That's really helpful. Thank you. I'd just like to ask you if you can think of any other examples of social entrepreneurs that you've worked with or come across, or even potentially funded yourselves, who were particularly memorable, or what was it about them that made them a really good case for funding? Who can I come to first? Jess, could I ask you? Oh, you're on mute.
Just thinking, that's put on the spot then. We've come across loads that are really good. I think the ones that seem to stand out in particular are those that have other income streams. So they've got entities within their business that can generate revenue that feeds into the business as well.
So it's like financial sustainability through.
Yeah, so they have the main business model that they do, but then other entities that do generate money, and all the profits go back into the main business. So it all comes under one umbrella. But they've got they're not just relying on the sole purpose of the business. That does bring in income as well, but they've actually got other revenue streams to sustain that. I'm trying to think of some off the top of my head to actually name the businesses that do this, but that's more of an idea of the model that tend to work well.
Yeah, thank you. How about Kat and Charlotte? Any thoughts on what makes an application or a bid stand out?
I've got a Manchester base. Like you see, I've funded so many people. It's really hard just to pull someone out.
Yeah.
But I've been working a couple of years ago. I worked with someone in Manchester called Reform Radio. I don't know whether you've come across them.
Yeah, we know the team there.
Yeah. So Rachel and the team at Reform Radio, they came onto the Thrive programme, and a bit like Jess was talking about, they've got their funding models really mixed. So they get some funding from the local authority. They've got contract income that comes from in the firm for like employability programs from Manchester Council. They get corporate sponsorship, so they've got a couple of corporate sponsors that sponsors programs. They also get grant funding, so they don't just put all the chickens in one basket. They've got, they're really adaptable in the way that they get funding in from trading, from grants from all over the place. The 24-hour radio station, they work across all the most deprived regions of Greater Manchester, working with young people, helping them into careers in digital enterprises. They launched their own record label recently, so when they take people through this process of training them up, and they had like a lot of young people that could do like rap music or drill music or trap music, rather than them passing them onto a record label, they want to be able to carry on working with them. And what makes them really stand out for me was the way that they really embraced their social impact work. So when they came into Unlimited, they were being asked to, and you'll get this as your social enterprises grow, you might get funding from here, and here, and all of these people have very different social impact requirements about the information they want from you, because a lot of it is funder-led. It's us going, right, we want you to measure employability outcomes and this and this and this, and suddenly the stuff you're having to measure gets longer and longer and longer and longer. And what was really important for Reform was that they really wanted to understand what impact that they wanted to create and get it into a really succinct strategy that it told the story of them, not their funders. And that's what they did over the course of the year at Unlimited, which is, Unlimited are great. If you're wanting to really hone down on what your social impact is and you're not working, you haven't got grant funding from Unlimited, go and have a look at Unlimited. Absolutely amazing support on how you talk about your impact. And they've just grown. I just love them. And they're really good. And they take you for dinner when you come and visit them as well. Once you've been working with them, they're just really nice people.
The whole room's now
that's Reform, not Unlimited.
Yeah, Unlimited won't take you for dinner.
I was just going to chip in. It's interesting you mentioned all that. Just so that the people on the panel know, and for anyone listening on Recap who might not be aware, as part of the Ellii Programme and our Time to Grow programmes, a big part of what we do is walk people through legal structures and understanding their legal structure, or setting up the right governance for what it is they're trying to do. And we have gone through that with this particular group. And likewise, we spent a lot of time today looking at social impact measurement to help tell some of the stories. And we make the point, or I make the point, around developing your own key value indicators rather than leaping and lurching from what the funders say they want, because otherwise you'll tie yourself in knots and you won't develop a consistent approach to measuring your impact.
Yeah, definitely. And it also helps you really home down where you can get your funding as well. So rather than just trying to fit yourself into someone else's funding all the time, you've just got such a strong, compelling case when you approach people, because it should make you money, should social impact. Like I always say to people, it should bring income into your organization. And if you get it right, it really does.
Yeah. And Charlotte, what do you think? What makes a change maker really stand out in an application?
I think just kind of embracing creativity. And I think we've all seen with the pandemic where organizations have had, say, for example, they've been given funds that due to the pandemic haven't been able to be used for specific events and projects, and just the way that organizations have kind of considered how they can adapt to this and still look at raising money and running projects in completely different contexts to what they'd originally asked the money for. So just for example, one organization in particular that stands out, we work with them from the Hygiene Bank, but Contact Hostel, who are based in South Manchester. They're a homeless shelter for young women in South Manchester, but they also work with the women to get employability and educational skills to kind of break that cycle, or help overcome the issues that are leading to homelessness. But they ran an in-person comedy night once the second lockdown had finished, and they had female comedians. They ran it from Feel Good Club in the Northern Quarters. They connected with local businesses to run this, so the business benefited from customers buying drinks and food. They sold tickets online. The event sold out. And alongside that, they had a text-in raffle for specific prizes, which I thought was genius, because normally you text in once and you're in the pot of, you know, potential winners. But with this, I was entering multiple times for different prizes. So I think a real winner there. They also had a cash raffle on the night, and they also did follow-up events, follow-up text-in donations. So just to kind of keep that money coming in from different sources. That night sold out, and they're doing another one. So I think just that creativity and embracing change and adapting to the surroundings is really, really stands out.
Oh, brilliant. I've just Tina's just saying she loves the Feel Good Club, so yeah, you're not alone there. So and Charlotte, I'll just stay with you for the next question. Just thinking about who might be useful potential allies or partners for VCSE organisations, you know, possibly some of the less usual suspects. Who might people be considering striking up some sort of relationship or potential partnership with?
I think this is something that really stands, so I'm not from Manchester, but I think something that really stands out to me about Manchester is that, you know, everyone recognises that we're all just trying to do something good. And I think within Manchester, you get a real feel for organisations and people supporting each other, partnering, community collaborations, which I love. So I think, you know, just kind of getting in touch with other groups that are doing a similar thing. How can you work together and make an even bigger impact? Also, you know, contacting your local VCS, so MAC, for support and how you can kind of network there. So for example, we do networking events called the Community Explorers. I'll put the link in the chat for that, but that's just we do a north, a south and a central Manchester get together online where groups can just introduce themselves, partner, network, make friends, you know, make links to each other and learn more about what everyone's doing. So I think just partnering within your community and seeing who else is out there. And then also where relevant, use those contacts for, you know, you can approach them for sponsorship, approach businesses for funding and donations. So just kind of networking with who's around you, what everyone's doing, and kind of just working together.
That's brilliant. And yeah, it's absolutely about the network, and sometimes it's just not visible, so it's great to know about those opportunities to start to link in with people in your local area who you might not necessarily have come across so far. Kat, what are your thoughts on, you know, potential allies or partners that organisations should be thinking about considering working with?
I think it's quite interesting because the last 4 years I've been working across the whole of the UK and working in regions that I just really, really didn't know at all. There's only certain areas of the country that have really, really strong social enterprise movements, and Greater Manchester is one of them. If you ever get the opportunity to go and travel the whole of UK and working with people, different social entrepreneurs in Northern Ireland, I was up in the Isle of Bute a few years ago working with somebody. They don't have any social enterprise sector. So coming back into Manchester again and being really geographical focused, there's so much going on here, but sometimes I wonder like if it can be like quite confusing to people as well to work out where to go and where to network, because there is so much going on. I've seen some really good events come out of Greater Manchester Social Enterprise Network recently. Like, I know you guys have been involved in them. There's a lot of acronyms.
We've designed and run them all because
exactly.
Some people just, you know, well, don't get me started. I'll be quiet, but yeah, we've run those.
Yeah, so it'd be, I mean, in my experience, like it's finding the network that is the closest to you and the people within that network, that if a big commissioning pot comes up and you need to group together and ally with people, then it needs to be around whatever your impact you're creating. So if you're doing health and well-being, find out where the health and well-being networks hang out. If you're doing disability unemployment, you need to start networking where they hang out, and be a bit more focused. Because if I don't live in Manchester, I live in Bradford, but I've worked in Manchester. If I lived in Manchester, I'd come to everything because it's so diverse and brilliant.
Oh, well, it's nice to hear that from outside. And yeah, well, we've got more allies to help us, I've got to say, you know. anyway, yeah, we'd gladly talk again to anyone and everyone. I know Mac do some good stuff. We've been doing quite a bit of stuff with Startup, that are quite an interesting organisation in North Manchester, getting more going with them, and they're up for events. What we found through COVID is, and lots of the infrastructure agencies have just shut their doors, and even if they're on Zoom, they won't flipping leave their office. So we've stood out a mile, you know, because we've been running physical events, and I think the research that we're doing at the moment is really showing that people want that. It's just, we'll have the infrastructure organisations box themselves in a corner and not budgeted for real world events. Who knows?
And Jess, what do you think? What other, you know, potentially less people that might, you know, organisations or partners, you know, it might be housing associations or universities that VCSE organisations might not have considered as part of their funding mix or potentials for building relationships with? Anything spring to mind, or any examples that you'd like to talk through?
I think it does all depend on the nature of your organisation, and which organisation would be a good fit for you and what stage you're at as well. You touched upon universities there. I spent a few years working at the University of Manchester, and in terms of working with social enterprises, there's loads of research projects available through universities. You know, students are needing to conduct research, PhD students, and it's connecting you with those. So depending on what stage you're at, that might be really beneficial, and especially for then going forward with funding, you've got evidence-based research that suggests, you know, this amount of funding could support you to do X, Y, and Z. And obviously, the more sorry.
Oh, I was just going to say, so how would people go about finding out about these potential?
Well, that's one of the difficult things, Shelley. I think there's all these great things going on, and it's where to start. And obviously, in terms of the university, it's such a big place.
We ran an event a while ago, and it was about 3 years ago, called, you know, how do you find the front door?
Yeah.
And we can run that again, and I'm very keen to get, we've got, because I work with 90 universities through Load of Unlimited work I did years ago, we've got really good relationships with all the Northwest based universities, or most of them, and we will try and not drag but bring some of them into some of the events coming up on this programme shortly. But yeah, it's hard, and the beauty now is, in addition to all the old contacts that we had anyway, because we supported a lot of women and other people through programs, a lot of them are in the Flourish Network anyway, so we've got a bunch of people. We've got a 2 or 3 pronged attack, I think, is what you have to do with universities. It's a bit like councils, and so you can go in from 3 or 4 angles and see what sticks. There's some key areas, aren't there, Jess, like the enterprise teams or the student sort of matchmaking for placements and different consultancy project teams,
and I think
incubators.
That's a good thing about universities. A lot of them are set up very similar in terms of the model. So once you've cracked which department looks after a particular area, it's you can only assume that another university would work in a similar way. The good tool we've now got is LinkedIn, which I think is fantastic, because on LinkedIn, majority of people will also list their job title. So you can often find the right person, the door, as you said, Michaela, to the institution, by finding, the name of the person, the job title, the department that they work in. And the chances are, if they're not the right person, they may know the person that is the right person. I'm saying person a lot, but yeah, the right person to speak with.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I think there's a step even before finding the door, because you need to know the door's there, that it actually exists. So, it's really helpful just to hear that these projects are out there and there is potential. And similarly with housing associations as well, there's real potential there. And you can, like you say, you can do good searches on LinkedIn for people who might have VCSE or social enterprise in their biog. And then that's potentially the way you can start to get in. You find your common area of interest. And like you say, if they're not the right person, they'll point you at the right person. So yeah, I just think making it the group aware that these doors exist is the first place to start, because beyond traditional grant funding, it might be that they're not so aware of these potential partnerships that could actually be an income stream.
And you're right, Shelley, because this particular programme, the Ellii Programme, is targeting the women's support sector, even if as a social entrepreneur or a social enterprise or a charity or whatever voluntary group, people that we've often worked with, they'll be more connected to all of this stuff. But sometimes in starting just a women's support organisation to address a need, or perhaps you've been that entrenched in just delivering services on the coalface, or in the sort of particular world for a while, you've perhaps not had a chance to reconnect or see yourself as being a good ally and somebody who is absolutely entitled to support in, be it any of these things that we've talked about. So sometimes people might see themselves as a group or a project or whatever it might be, but they're going to be welcome in these spaces.
Right, I'm going to ask one last question of the panel, and then I think we'll just have a little bit of space to ask for some questions from the participants as well. And so, yeah, if I could ask you, if you could just take off your organisational hat for a moment and just think back across your career, bearing in mind everything that you've learned today, what would be your 3 top tips for prospective grantees or prospective partners? What would be your advice then? Just to really put you on the spot. You need to come up with 3. No, you don't have to come up with 3, but 3 would be great if you've got 3. Charlotte, do you have some thoughts to jump on? Oh, Jess, I see you've come off mute. I'll go to you first.
I don't mind jumping in. I've got 2 that spring to mind, so I don't mind kicking off with those. I think firstly, when it comes to funding, and I know we've touched upon it recently, but know exactly what you need. So in terms of, funding, it's such a broad term, how much funding do you need? What do you need it for? What will it enable you to do? So have enough clarity around that funding, and enough evidence you've got or to suggest that it could help with X, Y, and Z. So have enough stuff to go with that, with your proposal, with your case, from what you need it for and what the outcome could be. And my second one, and we've just been on about it then, is just connect with people. It's amazing how much, especially in the social entrepreneurship world, how much people will support you. Lots of opportunities to network, and that's what, with the NatWest Accelerator, the community element of it is one of the key drivers. It's so valuable. We've got just over 200 social entrepreneurs on that programme. And now with the world of Zoom, they're connecting with each other all the time, pointing them to the right people, just helpful. So I just think, a tip going back across everything that I've recognised, just connect with as many people as you can, and don't be afraid to ask for help. And when it comes to funding, know exactly what you need.
That's brilliant. Thanks, Jess. Cass or Charlotte, who'd like to go next? Charlotte, I see you've come off.
Yeah, Jess, yours are really good. I think a key thing is managing your expectations. So if you are brand new to this, asking for 100k is probably not going to go down very well. So going on from Jess's point, looking at what you actually need funding for, and kind of pinpointing that. Also adding on from managing expectations, keeping in mind the time frame. So if you put an application and you're not going to hear back the next day, you need to think about, it might be a few months. So what are you going to do in those few months? How are you going to keep running? And so onto that, looking at a variety of sources. So not just applying for one fund and putting all your hopes on that one fund. Look at other ways of getting income generation. And another one, tapping onto Jess's, is just going on with the connections and picking up the phone to funders. Even if you're unsuccessful, get in touch with them and ask for feedback, because it's still you're still learning from that, and then strengthening your chances for the next one.
That's such an important point, Charlotte. And I was telling a group that I'm working with last night all about this, in that, how not to write a funding bid is what it was called. And we were talking about, what to do when you've rejected. And people just can spit their dummy out and think, oh, well, that's it. They didn't like me. I'm not going back. But that's the worst thing to do, because actually it could have been pipped at the post. You could have been within a whisker of getting it. It's so competitive right now to get different kinds of funds, and actually going back for that feedback where you can get it, or reapplying with improvement. The lottery awards for All for Short are really good, and Reaching Communities really good at giving you really constructive feedback as to how to strengthen an approach in future. And so take them up on that advice, and sometimes going back to a funder that's rejected you, you have a better chance of getting the money than starting cold with a fresh one.
Yeah, absolutely. Kat, what would be your top 3 tips?
Top 3, okay. Don't apply for it if you don't really believe that you're going to get it. So just don't waste your time. And this comes from my previous experience. I was a business development manager of a massive charity for years, based in Leeds. And my CEO would make me apply for everything, every single pot of money that came out, every commission that came out, every tender that came out. Most of it we weren't even really eligible for, but it was he wanted the opportunity rather than the actual reality of it. And then we would just get rejection after rejection after rejection. And there's nothing worse. It's nothing more demoralizing. And you're not supposed to take it personally, you do take it personally. Once you've got your impact down and completely sorted, you've got your theory of change, you understand your metrics, you'll just really understand which funders closely aligned to you anyway, be less time wasting. Just don't go there and cycle through that application thing. There's no point. Be able to back up the evidence that you're putting on your grant application. So research data is really, really a big part of applying for funding. So if you say that you're working in disability unemployment, you need to back it up with the proving that there is a need for it. So you need to understand, where do you get national statistics from? Where do you get local statistics from? How can you use that against your social impact measurements that you've decided to do? Because if there isn't a national need for it, if you can't evidence a local need for it, the funders won't get it and what you're doing. So there's kind of a bit of a joint impact and evidence. And then the only last one, don't ever employ a bid writer, ever. We can see through it in funders. I know straight away when someone's got a bid writer in to write a bid for them, because I'd rather have spelling mistakes and grammatical mistakes, but the passion isn't there. And you only get that passion from the people that are involved in it. That's it.
That's really, really helpful. Thank you.
What if the people haven't got time? I'm just going to kick that bears devil's advocate, because part of our bread and butter is bid writing, and we have a really good success rate. We worked with 45 organisations last year, went for over £1 million worth of funding, or around about £1 million, and helped secure £750,000 for small organisations that wouldn't otherwise have had the time, wouldn't have been able to go for it, didn't have the confidence that they should. Many of the women we work with are dyslexic, some have got ADHD, they hate this stuff. So, you know, is there ever a case for having a bid writer?
I think that it's, I mean, we've got the Reach Fund. So if we have social entrepreneurs that are applying for social investment that have got barriers to apply in, then we would use our Reach Fund money to bring people in to help them write their applications. That's absolutely fine. It's organisations that employ a bid writer and they're so detached from the organisation that they really miss that kind of the real passion of what they're delivering. And that's what we see a lot. You know, they'll employ somebody that will talk to them a couple of times, throw loads of bids off, and that's it.
No, that's
where
I take that point.
That's where you miss the local bit of it, the local passion and the understanding of what's actually happening to them.
Totally. And people can think the bid writer is the font of all knowledge. I know, you know, we write people's social value reports and really get under the skin of their organisation. So perhaps that's where we've got a bit more knowledge and real passion. We kind of follow the passion because we probably supported them to start up in the first place. But I think I get you, because we've worked with somebody recently who is meant to have this bid writer doing all of this stuff, and I've gone in and looked at it, and they're based in London. They've got no idea really what these people are doing, and yeah, I know. I take that point.
Well, thank you. I'm conscious of time. We have reached time, but if our panelists have got a few minutes to take any questions from our participants and can hang around, then that would be fantastic. That's great. Thank you. So yeah, if I could return to the floor and see if anyone would like to ask any questions specifically or generally, or anyone's got
sharing. It's a bit easier to see if anybody's waving or got
much easier to see. Oh, thank you.
We probably worn them all out, to be fair. It's been a long day. It's a lot.
Done a lot of listening.
Thrown a lot at them. It's one of those topics, social value measurement. Anybody anything to think about? I've thrown some bits in the chat whilst you're thinking, or if you want to come off mute to ask a question, just around some current funds around. I mean, really, you've got to get on newsletters, you've got to be part of networks to keep up to date with what's coming out. but there are funds coming around that pop up, and I've just put some information about the Social Enterprise Support Fund in the chat. It's one that came about through COVID, and there's about 4 different funders involved: School for Social Entrepreneurs, I think, Key Fund, Unlimited, and the Lottery. It's not for the faint-hearted. There's a lot to put in there, but if you're turning over, don't quote me, something like 30 or 50k, then you can go for this. And the reason I said I'd mention it is because there's the last call out, or the next call out, but I think it might be the last, is coming up 28th of February, and I mention it because they're very up on support diversity and inclusion with this fund. The criteria and the scoring really heavily was weighted towards women, people from culturally diverse backgrounds, people from the LGBT community, and people with disabilities. And I know that a lot of the people on the programme and might find the criteria worth looking at, even if it's a bit of a stretch to get the bid together. Anybody got any burning questions? But no one's waved at us in the meanwhile. Can I ask, Jess, would you mind staying just a little bit, because I don't think you got the full airtime, is to talk about the purpose-led accelerator. So Flourish has been on the purpose-led accelerator in the last year, and it's helped us to think through a bunch of things. There's a whole bunch of kind of peer support stuff that I couldn't take advantage of because I've just been too busy, but they've been really flexible with me and had good one-to-one support and access to all sorts of tools and resources. And I just wonder, is there another call coming out in the next quarter, or when might the next accelerator call out go?
Yeah, so the accelerator, it's a 6-month programme that run on the back of each other. So we started the new one in January. So the next call will probably be around April time, ready for a June start. So yeah, it's a wider high growth accelerator, but we've noticed over the years that we had a large number of purpose-led businesses coming forward. So those that put people and planet over the profits. So we brought together those businesses and had it as a specialist accelerator. So you're still part of the Manchester community or the Leeds community or whichever hub you're part of, but you've also got access to a whole range of support specific to your particular business. So you've got network across the UK of other purpose-led businesses. As I said before, we've got over 200 on that this time round. We do specific events all around. It could be measuring your impact and becoming a B Corp, all the things that purpose-led businesses are interested in. And then, of course, the one-to-one coaching. So we work with you on a month-by-month basis to keep you on track, hold you to account, help you set goals to move forward and progress with your business.
Thank you. I just wanted to make people aware, because I think it's one of those opportunities that the voluntary community sector and certainly the women's support sector perhaps wouldn't see themselves as perhaps going for, and there's every reason why they should. So just put that out there.
Yeah, and you don't need to bank with NatWest to be part of that accelerator. So invites are open to all.
Wow, helpful to hear. Lovely. Nearly there, aren't we? And we've not had anyone wave at us. There's all sorts in the chat, so do have a nosy. Oh, fantastic. Great, go for it, Dee.
I think I'm a bit confused about, when you're applying for startup, when you're applying for accelerator, I don't really understand kind of the stages of when you should apply for funding.
Horses for courses, isn't it? So there are funds for whether you're, early stage, so early stage fund trajectory might look like Unlimited, School for Social Entrepreneurs, some individual sort of funds, or using the fundraising methods that Charlotte talked about and crowdfunding things individuals can look at. And then once you've got a legal structure in place, which we've walked through, and having a governance model, be that a constituted group, if you need to test things out, pilot things, you're not sure if you want to be a company yet and all of that, you can then use that constitution or that company structure, depending on what you go for, to look at awards for all, other lottery funds, things that might be local to you in your community, linked to CVSs, the community foundations. So
it will very much be in the eligibility criteria. So different organisations have different criteria for what constitutes a startup or what constitutes accelerator. So if you just you know, a great start point. Always go straight to the eligibility criteria and see if you've ticked those boxes.
I think that's part of my confusion, because startup seems to mean different things to different people.
Yeah, startups normally 0 to 3 years. There's kind of pre-start, startup, and scale up, and sometimes it's down to the length of time you've been running, and sometimes it's down to your turnover. Different organisations class it in different ways.
Okay.
No, that's all right. Fab. It's a good question though, because yeah, it's all a bit of a blur, isn't it?
Great. So I think if we've not got any more questions, we'll wrap it up there and say thank you very much to our panelists for their insights and tips. That was really interesting and useful. And we'll be sharing this recording with the wider Flourish Network and the other members of the Ellii programme who weren't able to come today. So thank you very much for your time. We really appreciate it.